So by nature, I'm not a social person at all. I was always the one in high school, just in the background, floating around, not talking to anyone, scared to death, scared to fail at anything. Um, and I missed a lot of opportunities. And and I had something that happened in my life that didn't change my nature, but it made me do things that otherwise I never would have done or never would have been able to do. And me playing on stage with Ludacris and Chingy um, is something that I would have never done in high school. Believe me. Um, it's important that I show you what happened to kind of change my mentality and how I incorporate that into the classroom and trying to teach and inspire my students. So I'm going to try to share my PowerPoint with you guys. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Um, can you guys see my PowerPoint? Can someone let me know? All right. Well, it's got me at the end of it, so I'm gonna start it over. I'm glad you can see it though. Okay, try this again. So what changed everything for me, and you'll see me in that picture. I'm pretty white, but I was much paler there, as you can see. And this is the day that I died. It's known as the worst day in United States history for riptides in Florida. And it was the event that changed um, everything as far as advertisements for riptides, putting flags out everywhere, educating people, because before this event, it had not happened. In this paper, it says it kills 5, but that was the early totals. It rose to honestly, I almost didn't want to know because there's so many different reports. I saw at one time 12 or 13, and and I witnessed these people die, and I saw them, and it was a traumatizing experience. And I was one of those that died. I was just lucky for some reason, and that tore me up for a long time. I had PTSD about it, but it's important to kind of know what happened and how it changed me and my thought process. And then I'll roll into how I incorporate that into my classroom. Well, I was in the band back then, but I was still incredibly shy. I just had fallen into that. And we were playing at Club La Vila in Florida the whole week. So we had Monday through Sunday, we were supposed to play. Well, Monday through Saturday, um, it had rained about like how it's doing now. And when you go to Florida, you want to go to the beach, right? Well, problem, it had rained the whole time until that Sunday, and it's the most beautiful day you'd ever seen. So we all ran out into the Gulf of Mexico, and the riptides got us. And you don't realize how strong they can be, or at least it was on this particular day. If you don't know what a riptide is, if you've ever been in the water, the Gulf of Mexico, you feel that pull and release by the water, the gentle rocking back and forth, and it feels nice. Um, that particular day, it had the pull, but there was never a release. And I was less than knee deep in water when it grabbed my legs and pulled me out, along with many others. Some of the ones that died were lifeguards because it was very difficult. And I didn't know what to do for riptides. My first impulse was to swim towards the beach to safety, right? Which is not what you do, but I didn't know that. And I swam towards the beach, and I noticed I kept getting further and further and further away. And that didn't work. And I looked on the beach and I saw a number of people running around. It was pandemonium, panic. And the only person that I recognized, because everyone's about the size of ants, and the only reason I knew who it was because it's a guitarist in my band, and he's just so hairy. He looks like David Hasselhoff or Chewbacca or something running around. He looked like a little piece of carpet running around. So I knew that, and he was my best friend. And I had the thought that I wish no one ever had. And that thought is, I'm about to die. And I had time to think about it. And the moments after knowing that was incredibly difficult because I knew I can't swim to the beach no matter how hard I try. And my best friend can't get to me. That means nobody can get to me. I'm about to die. And over time, my breathing patterns changed, which I think is pretty incredible. Um, I would inhale, and then the waves would hit me while I exhaled underwater. But my breathing patterns changed to the rhythm of the waves, which I think is just fascinating. And it saved my life. One of the many bizarre things that did save my life that day. And then I blacked out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico for what they think was minutes. Um, and I don't know how I survived that. I don't know how long I was out because I had many, many, many short dreams. And you know, they say your life flashes before your eyes. Well, mine did, but it wasn't all of the things that I had done. Keep in mind, I was the age of our students that we have here. It wasn't about, I didn't dream of all the things I had done, but all the things that I would never get to do, which is much worse. And it was some things that I didn't even know was important to me was revealed then, because when you're 20, I don't even remember how old I was. But when you're that young, you think you have all the time in the world, so you don't sit around and think about what's important. You just kind of float through life. Sometimes we do that at our age now too. I do sometimes. I had to wake myself up. But the dreams I had, one was something silly for most people, but it was important to me. I would never get to see the Chicago Bears play at Soldier Field. Um, I wouldn't be able to say goodbye to my grandmother. And then one interesting thing that I never thought was important until this event, I never get to tell my dad I loved him. And I had never thought about that consciously before this event. And my dad is the macho type, "Argh." So I think if we said I love you, those words, or if we actually physically touched, we would explode like spontaneous combustion. I don't know. It's just one of those things. But apparently, I wanted to say the words, and I didn't know it. And I did after. And then I had my last image that I had played out like a movie. It showed a scrolling white picket fence, stereotypical perfect house in the suburbs, a woman walking out with a baby. The woman's face was blurry, so I knew the person that I was interested in at the time wasn't the woman. Kind of interesting way to find that out. And obviously, that was important that I wanted that to happen before I died. And then I woke up in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, still bobbing like a cork, getting knocked up under the waves. And I had one last conscious decision before I gave up. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to give up. If I'm going to die, I'm at least not dying alone because I'd heard people crying to my right, crying to my left. The bassist in my band, who was a 6'4", very burly construction worker, tough guy, was crying for his mom like a child. And that is a horrifying sound to hear. And I told myself, I'm not dying alone, or I'm at least going to try to save somebody before I go down. And that last thought and decision saved my life. Again, one of the many things. So what did I do? I started swimming towards those voices that I heard, which is parallel to the beach, right? And if you know anything about riptides, that's exactly what you do to get out of it. But I didn't know that. I was just swimming towards where I'd heard the cries. I also didn't know that the guitarist in my band, the little piece of carpet, he and a bunch of other people had formed a human chain all across the Gulf of Mexico to where the shelf dropped off and it got too deep. They could only get to one spot. and to save people, or they would get pulled under too. Not knowing, I swam in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico to the only spot they could save me. And the chances of that are astronomical. I never saw the chain of people. I just swam there blindly because I couldn't pull my head up. I didn't have enough energy. But when I got to my best friend and I clung to him, that's when my heart stopped and I died. They passed my lifeless body from person to person to person and slammed it down on the beach, and water shot out of me. And my heart started again. And I couldn't move for a couple hours after that. I could barely speak. It took a long time. Um, and it was a very traumatizing experience. But it changed my life in a lot of ways. It didn't change my nature of being scared or antisocial, but it made me come out of it. All of the things I had put off for so long, I didn't do that anymore. I knew I had a lot of regrets in my life, and I thought I had all the time in the world to overcome those regrets. And then I realized, no, I'm not living that way anymore. I didn't change my nature, but I changed how I handled things and how I acted. And I've lived a better life since. Um, Let me move on. Okay, so we're going to see how this impacted me, and I'll show you how it impacted our students. Okay, can you see these pictures okay? Can someone okay, good. Well, I used to turn things down. Guess what? I didn't have enough money to see the Chicago Bears play, I didn't think, but I sold a guitar I wasn't using. I drove there, saw them play, and came back. Before, going to Chicago was the equivalent of going to the moon. It seemed impossible. I'm a country boy. What am I going to do in a big city like that? That sounds scary. Don't have enough money for that. All of those excuses were gone, and I did it. Had the time of my life. Um, so every opportunity that popped up for me, I would not let fear limit me. Um, I went to Key West. You can go anywhere, guys. If you got a tent and some gas, you can go anywhere. Always wanted to go to Key West. I went to Key West with my tent, camped out on the beach in Key West, and I came back. Um, didn't cost very much at all. I had, after I drowned, well, let me tell you this first. After I drowned, I went back home for the first time, and my whole family was parked in the driveway waiting for me because they didn't know if I was alive or dead. I had told them I was, but they had to physically touch me and see me to feel it. I had people in early social media. I think it was like MySpace. I don't know what it was. It was very old. They were saying their goodbyes to me on MySpace, and I had to get on there and say, "I'm still alive, guys. I'm good." And they would reply back with, "Stop playing, man. This isn't funny." So they had to see me. So I got home, but instead of going inside, um, I stopped, and it was at night, and I looked up at the sky, and I thought, my goodness, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. These stars are different. They're beautiful. I stood out there staring upwards for over half an hour before going inside the house. And afterwards, I thought about that moment and I thought to myself, I don't think the sky was any different from any other night. I just think I took a second to appreciate it. And I learned from that moment to take deep breaths and to appreciate the things around me and to see this big, beautiful world after, to take chances, uh, to not be afraid anymore. And my life has changed for the better. Um, and I made a list of all of the things that I wanted to do, like a bucket list, right? And I have my students do that list too. And we carve our whole course around that. But I don't call it a bucket list. That sounds morbid. It's just things I want to accomplish in 5 to 10 years. One item on my list was to sing with a gospel choir. And what was so cool in the last breakout session, one of those members was in there. Ah, the AASO choir. That's it. Yeah. How cool is that? Look at that. That's so cool. How awesome is that? So
What?
that's so neat. So both breakout sessions, I've had people from that choir that was a part of that experience. And see, guys, I used to not approach anyone. If I went to a party, it was the worst thing in the world. I would stand in the background, not talk to anyone with my hands in my pockets. And I still feel that way, but I make myself go talk to people. And when I drowned, I made this list of things that I wanted to do, and singing with a gospel choir was one of them. And I did it. And I started checking those items off the list, and it's always growing. And guys, before my accident, I hadn't dropped out of school. I just hadn't re-enrolled, which is the same exact thing. Um, it's just a nicer way of putting it. Well, I went back to school, and this is really, I hope, helpful to my students. It's hard to get across, but when I went back to school, it was different. I hated school. It was stressful. It was boring. I was so pent up wanting to make certain grades to get finished so that I could live afterwards. There's no time for that. You can live while you're in school. And it was not a fun experience for me until that accident. And when I re enrolled, I felt like that knowledge had been pulled away from me. I would never get to learn things. So when I went back to school, I didn't care. I wasn't shooting for the A. That wasn't why I went to school. It wasn't to make grades. It was to learn. And I wanted to learn everything because it was precious once it was taken away. So I took classes that I didn't need and classes of things that I knew nothing about. I took women's studies because I didn't know anything about women. I still don't know that much, but I learned a lot. Uh, and I took African American studies because I'm not black, and I loved it. It was my favorite class. I was the only Caucasian in there, and which was awesome. That's how I ended up singing in the prior song with Ludacris and Chingy. It just kind of developed, and then we helped build and establish the African American USO Museum in Hattiesburg. Um, just all of these incredible things that I would never have tried before. Met some amazing people. This man in Scotland, just one of them down at the bottom picture there. He, we felt like we were brothers by the time we left. Normally, I would have never talked to him. When I met my wife, um, for our second date, before our second date, I told her kind of about my list. And I said, why don't you make a list? Or what is something you've always wanted to do? And she said, I've always wanted to go to Red Bluff. How many of you have ever heard of Red Bluff? Some of you have. It's around Columbia, Mississippi, and it's called Mississippi's Little Grand Canyon. And it's pretty cool. It really is neat. And the reason I bring up this point is she lived 20 minutes from it, yet she had never seen this place she had always wanted to see since she had known about it for many, many, many years. And I've come to realize there's so many other people like me that put stuff off or makes excuses not to do it when it's easier than you think and it's important. So how did I include this in the classroom? Well, when I started teaching, um, and guys, I know that I think right now on Twitter there's this thing where people say, "Oh, he's posting his wins." Right now. I'm posting some good stuff, things I'm proud of. But believe me, there's lots of losses. Um, man, I had a moment this week where I sat in my office and cried, thinking I don't know if I can do this much longer. And the reason I keep doing it is I have these passions, um, these projects. I keep making things new for myself. For example, when I was thinking that the other day, I was down and out. It was pretty bad. And then I had this esports meeting and I met all of these students so excited to have a place to call their own, to meet people like themselves, grinning and laughing and excited. We're working on establishing our first student hub on campus at JC, and they said they needed my help for that. And I was like, okay. It got me excited and passionate again. And that's pulled me back from the brink. We have to kind of do that sometimes. Before, I was scared to try anything outside of the norm. Well, guess what? The norm gets stale and kind of boring. When you've taught Comp 1, 1,000 different um, classes of Comp 1, it gets kind of boring after a while. You lose your passion, it comes across the students, it gets old with them. So I thought to myself, well, what is something that I would like to learn more about? And then I try to incorporate that into the classroom. For instance, in my Comp 2 class, I introduced comics. I had not read a comic book since I was in high school. I didn't know much about teaching it. People laughed at me when I thought about it, but they gave me permission to do it if I bought my own materials, and I did. That was my birthday and Christmas that year. I bought materials for everyone. And I had so many students come up that weren't enrolled in the class that I had to ask Dr. Brown what the weight limit was in our room because I was very scared it was going to come tumbling down. I had to get a bigger room. People were sitting in the hallway. Had nothing to do with me. It was just they were interested in the subject. So then I got to thinking, what else can I add? And I kept adding and trying different things. And I've heard from people before when I tell them this, in particular about comics, is they have that fear. Ooh, I couldn't do that. That looks awesome. I know that's fun and they learned a lot. That's kind of scary. That's very different. Um, or I wonder if they would like it if I did this. And what I've come to find out, if you're passionate about whatever it is you're teaching, it's going to come across to them. You're going to do a better job teaching. You're interested and reinvigorated, and your smile is going to be infectious. And that's what happened for me. And I kept adding. I wanted to go to the bayou, so I incorporated. I took my little trail of hobbits. We read the Hobbit. And I took my fellowship out to the bayou. So I've tried to make myself passionate again. Again, the esports thing. When I joined or when I started that on the JC campus, it grew so fast because I liked video games and I saw a lot of students that had nowhere to go, no kind of clubs that they were interested in, and we kind of started it. And in 2 months' time, it became the largest club at the whole entire college. We had over 200 members college-wide, and about 130 of them came from JC campus. And they got so big, Dr. Graham here came out to see it. So these are just little passion projects that I've thrown myself into. So don't be afraid to try something new. What I've come to find out is there are things much worse than failure, and that's regret of not trying at all. And I realized that when I died because I had many regrets by just being afraid. So I kind of continued that idea with my teaching because what I'm going over in this breakout session today is not just for how to inspire the students, but inspire each other. I, there are a lot of special guests that I've started bringing to the college. This is just over the last couple of years. We got Mr. Stephen Butler up here. A lot of people may know him. He's a famous comic book artist. We had Tony Freeth from the University of London Zoom meeting last week with us. Got a trapeze artist and dancer from New York City. We got Jeremy Tomley, motivational speaker. We got an Antarctic explorer. We got Eric Zala, who's worked with Steven Spielberg. We got a rock and roll photographer. And before, again, my nature is to not talk to people. And that's very hard. And I was missing out on relationships. And I wanted to inspire my students, and I'd see all these amazing people that have accomplished so much. And I'm like, wow, they're doing amazing things. Um, we have these artists, and it's hard to be successful as an artist. Um, just really work so hard and accomplish so much. How can I get these guys to speak to my classroom? And little by little, I started getting one after the other come speak to my class, and it just started snowballing until people were asking me to come. So it was a lot of fun, and it went a long way. Now we can ask for guest speakers in any kind of classroom. I want to point out Miss Jennifer Devereaux here in the middle of this picture in the bottom left corner. She is a rock and roll photographer who's been in Rolling Stone magazine, among countless others, very getting very popular as a photographer. And I got to speaking with her to get her to come, but she had a great fear of being in public. And she said, but she's always wanted to show her work, but she's like, it's just a little different. It's rock and roll photography. That's not, people don't usually say that's all that great and show it in schools. And I thought, you know, our students would love it. I love it. And her fear had kept her from ever having a show. So the same speech that I give my students, I gave her. I said, do it. Put yourself out there and see what they think. And she came to the college, who's very famous for what she does, yet she was scared still to do something. Her fear was holding her back. This was on her bucket list. She put her work up on the wall, and she had a life moment that she'd always wanted to have. So it doesn't matter if it's a student, a teacher, doesn't matter what age. Sometimes there's fear and doubt that creeps in our minds and makes us not do these things. Miss Summer Baldwin down here, the dancer and trapeze artist. She worked in New York City, married someone related to the Blue Man Group, if you've ever heard that. She came out, and so you may think, I teach English. So what does dance have to do with English? Well, in English, we teach stories, right? Storytelling. Can you tell stories by body movements? Of course. So I developed a theme to fit my special guest. And now my Comp 2 class is there are many ways to tell a story. And I invite an actual dancer, Summer Baldwin, to come out and perform for our students. And she got up there and sat on stage, and she says, I'm terrified right now. I have a passion to dance. I've always had it in me, but I was afraid to do it in front of other people. But I've had to overcome that fear, and that fear and social anxiety. Through that, I've created a dance called A Loneliness. And then she danced A Loneliness. And afterwards, a student came up to me crying, and she says, thank you. I got it. And I said, what do you mean? She says, I've been in therapy my whole life for depression. And for the first time, someone spoke to me. For the first time, someone understood what my depression was like, and I felt it through her dance, and it healed me. I feel relieved that I'm not alone in the world. So she was told that story by that dancer. So including these other people in the community is easier than you think, and it really goes a long way. And it not only helps the students, man, it's a lot of fun. It kind of reinvigorates you too, and changing up the curriculum here and there, being a little brave with it. Okay, so I tried to take it further, and this is probably the most, getting more towards the relevant bit for what you probably need, as far as how to teach it in the classroom. So years ago, I guess it was about 4 or 5 years ago, Dr. Bradley and Dr. Brown got together with me to create a new class. It was called English 0124, and this is my class here. The problem was, through meetings, it became apparent that we were losing, really our developmental program, as in like beginning English and possibly intermediate at that time. And I was very outspoken. How can I say it? I was very worried about what was going to happen to those students who were not prepared to take undergraduate Comp 1 classes, regular college algebra classes. I said, what about those students who usually needed that extra work? And there was a possibility of not having any extra help for them. So I said, well, give me a chance at doing something different. And they helped me create this trial course. And this is them. And I look at their smiles. You can tell the difference between sincere and not. Every one of them graduated. These are students who had low scores that statistics say would not graduate. And so I actually reached out to them and heard from a lot of them yesterday. It was like, this is your life. It was really cool to see them 4 or 5 years later, what they're doing, and they're doing very well. But I incorporated some of these methods, including something I call the My Life Project. So what is the My Life Project? Well, basically, they have a whole year-long project that every assignment in the class, in Comp 1 in particular, works towards this end of the semester project, okay? And in doing so, every assignment is catered individually to each student and what they think is important to them. And now some of this I'll try to explain to you. For instance, life philosophy. I tell them my experience and I have them make a list of things that they want to accomplish in 5 to 10 years. And then they have to then research how to make that happen. Now they have to pick some things that they can accomplish during the semester and some things further out, like 5 years from now. And guys, I have had people bring back their list 5 years later, showing me that they've checked these items off. Some of them are all wadded up and you could tell they've been taped to the wall, which is what some of them did. They taped it to their bedroom door or the door walking outside. What I've come to find out is if you write it down and plan for it and talk about it, is much more likely to happen. And that's what I learned from my drowning experience. I had all of these things that I wanted to do and I talked myself out of it. But if you make it an important thing to work towards these things and you plan for it and you write it down, it's much more likely to happen. So some of these things, for instance, life philosophy. My version of that was I wanted to see the Chicago Bears play. So I sold a guitar and I went and I did it. For some of my students, their life philosophy can be, it's not too large or there's not one that's too large or too small, guys. I've had one do, let's see, I had a very large one. One of my favorite stories, I had a student who never knew her birth mother. And she said, Mr. Mooney, I want to find my mom. So we researched for her research paper. Now, when people hear research paper, they think that's just an assignment, something you have to do. It's very boring and not applicable. No, research is an amazing tool to know how to do. So her research assignment was to find her mom and research if she should reconnect with her. And that's what she did. And for Thanksgiving, she reunited with her birth mom and met her for the first time. How, it doesn't get much better than that. I've had 4 students overcome addictions. And they message me every once in a while. I guess I've become like an AA sponsor in a way. They message me every once in a while and they say that, I'm getting messages, make sure. Okay. But I hear from them every once in a while and they say I'm 297 days sober, I'm 1,200 days sober. And by showing that you care, by researching things and making it applicable, by improving yourself to just be happy and be proud of yourself, you can do that. I had one student who had a kind of a warped view of love, honestly. She said her grandfather told her that what she needed to do was get married and divorced 3 times. That way she'll never have to work a day in her life. And that's what she wanted to do. That was her plan. And the classmates, when they heard it, were like, ooh, that doesn't sound like a great plan. And I said, well, what about love? She's like, I can do without that. I said, how about we research it? Can you research love? You better believe it. There's self-help marriage books out there. So whatever someone is interested in or needing at the time, they can do it. I've had some do minor things as well. I had a guy who wanted to go to Comic-Con in San Diego. So we researched when it was, how much it would cost, the safest place to go. We made a plan for how much money to save per check, and he went by the end of the semester. So they're still learning to write and research, and you get to see these little minor successes in their life building up, and it gives them confidence, and I think keeps them in school. Obstacles. Actually, I skipped career goals. I haven't researched their career. Half of them end up changing their career before they get out of the class because they realize you can't get jobs in it or they just don't like it. So we use research to help them choose what they'd be good at and what they like. Obstacles, I have them choose 2 or 3, and then we work on overcoming those obstacles. Some are minor, like I can't wake up in the morning, to, like I said, addictions and stuff like that. We talk about mentors, proteges, finding good friends. I mean, we really talk about all these things, and it's kind of a great fun thing to do. I think very helpful to them. So here are a couple of success stories through the My Life project, some more serious than the others. The lady on the left, she said, I want some money. All right, I do too. She said, well, are there scholarships out there that I can try to get? And then, well, that was her focus that semester. We researched and found scholarships. She wrote essays in my class for those scholarships, and she left with way more money than I had. So maybe I need to learn from her. She just finished graduate school. Again, this is another one of those students that from the developmental that pretty awesome how far she's come. The lady in the middle here, she said she wanted to feel young again. And I said, okay, well, let's brainstorm and research how you can do that. And she said, I always want to go rock climbing. That's on my list. And I said, ha, JC campus, we have a rock climbing wall. So we went as a class to support her. She wanted to feel young again, and she climbed the rock wall. Honestly, out of all of the younger students there, she was the only student who got to the top. So it was cool to see her ring that bell. The student on the right, again, no matter how large or small, if it's important to them, it's important. He wanted to dye his hair. He'd always wanted a different shade of color for his hair. And another student found out about it. She said, I've always wanted to dye someone's hair. I was like, okay, if it's important to you, it's important to me. And while the rest of the class was finishing their essays, we had this going on in the background. I think his hair was supposed to be blonde, but it ended up very orange. But it was important to him. Guys, I do the same thing. I told them that once in my life, I wanted a beard. Hence, this is where this came from. I don't know how long I'm going to keep it. My kids hate it. My wife likes it. But I wanted to do it once in my life. So checking that off the list. So I do it with them. I went through a divorce, and as they were going through their personal things, I said, you know, this is the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life. I don't know if I can go through the pain of something like that again. I don't know if I can love or trust someone again. And I researched it along with them, and they were rooting for me all along the way, and now I'm happily married. So we all go through these things and through these fears in life. So it's to have that support system along with the class has been pretty cool. Okay, let's move along. So the way I do this in my class, we have discussions, essays. They give an end of the year presentation, usually like a PowerPoint or a video, or just speaking to us about it. And we have what's called a Danny Deck Chair Day. Now, it's a big party where we do things in class that we've always wanted to do, or outside that we can do together. Now, Danny Deck Chair is a movie from Australia, and it's about this man that everything happens to him all in the span of like 2 days. His wife is cheating on him. He's lost his job, which he hated anyway, and everyone thinks he's a joke. And they have this barbecue, and they tie all these helium balloons to his chair to see how many it would take for him to float away. Well, he actually accidentally gets loose, and he floats to another town and falls out of the sky. And when he falls out of the sky in this other town, a lady finds him, and she asks who he is, and almost like he doesn't know why, but he changes his name. And he lives in this other town under another name, and he does things differently from his normal nature. He's now brave. He now speaks for himself. He's confident. And in the span of a week, everyone in town loves him. Whereas in the past town, everyone thought he was a joke. And the only thing that changed with him, other than the scenery, was just confidence and trying to do something better. And so we kind of call that the Danny Deck Chair Day, where we do something we've always wanted to do but talked ourselves out of it. Okay. How can we do this in other classes? I tried to brainstorm this last night. Something like history. You could trace your own family lineage and history. Sociology. That's all of us have some kind of social anxiety to an extent, or some kind of personal problems we can work on socially. Well, we can make it more personal. Biology, study families, genetics, and hereditary illnesses. Math. My wife is a math instructor at William Carey, and we talked about it. I thought, you remember the old game Life, where you just try to survive, from what I understand, not go broke? Well, it's hard. Life is hard. I had a student come to me one day and he said, Mr. Mooney, I did it. And I was like, what'd you do? Read this letter, man. I'm rich. I was like, okay, man. He said, I'm getting $20,000. And I was like, let me read this letter. It was a loan for $20,000, and the percent interest was like 39%. And he's like 18. I was like, man, this is not free money. I'm going to be rich. You might not see me tomorrow. People believe that. In math, we need to make it more applicable. And we do here at the college, and my wife does. I never really had that in my classes way back when, but I think it would be cool to say, okay, how do you want to be living in 5 to 10 years? Give them their budget and then throw things at them. Oh, air conditioner went out. Uh-oh, you signed up for a credit card, but you didn't pay it last month. And let them actually manage their finances and set up to save and buy a house and take out. Okay, not really. Don't have them take out loans, fake loans. We need to learn that kind of stuff. Psychology, I do that in my class. Have them face their obstacles, write about them, research them. Music, art, and dance, have them actually produce something, to actually learn an instrument that semester, improve it. Keep going. I think I already did that. Okay. All right. So I would love it. Let me see if I can go back. If you guys could try this too, because it's not just for students, and I do it all the time. I'm constantly changing things. And I make items on my list. There's some things that I want to do, and I'm constantly adding to that list and changing it and checking, putting check marks. And there's something about putting it on paper that really makes you more likely to do it. So if you do any of these things, like make a list or go to Red Bluff or do something you've always wanted to do, send me a picture of it. I'd love to see it and hear about it. And keep in mind, there are cool things right next door that you can do, um, that you just might not be aware of. And make yourself take time to enjoy yourself. Okay. So I want to stop in time to have some questions because I know we're running out of time. Does anyone have questions? You see that AASO choir? I see that now. That's so cool. Small world, huh? That's amazing.
This is Jared. I don't have a question, but I really want to sincerely thank you for your transparency and sharing is very, very impactful, very inspirational. So thank you so much for what you do for our students every day.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Um, and guys, I know it's hard. It's hard to be an instructor, and I have to make myself find the passion again, just like you would in a marriage sometimes, right? And at your job, like if you do the same thing every day, it can get stale and boring. So don't be afraid to step out of the norm and try something different because your students will appreciate it. Um, does anyone have any questions about anything? Student did not have resources such as either. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Um, there's a lot of times, I think all of us had a teacher that we really liked that would get a little personal. Now, I mean, you can go too far with that, but if you show them how to make the subject area applicable, it also shows that you care a little bit. I think, you know, you're not there to just teach them to read and write, but to understand why it's important to read and write. When I walk into my classroom, um, and we start teaching grammar, I tell them, I said, never change who you are. One of or your culture. You don't have to change that when you walk into a room necessarily. First thing I say is, "How y'all doing?" It's really hard to get a job teaching English with a Southern accent like mine. It's more Southern than Mississippi. People in Mississippi think I'm from Texas. That's hard. um, but I tell my students, don't change who you are. When you talk with your friends, talk like you normally do in your family, but be able to flip that switch. Not to change who you are, but not to give them ways to judge you, to limit you. Show them that you're educated. That's what I'm giving you the tools to do. So I just think it's important to show the relevance of things. Otherwise, they don't care. How do I know that? Because I didn't care. I had to be shown that or realize it. And it made a difference for me. I loved school. Unfortunately, I had to have the accident to love it before I hated it. Does anyone else have any questions? Jocelyn, were you in that picture? Are you still there?
No, I wasn't in that picture. But I'm still friends with a lot of the people that were. I feel like we were there at the same time, but we were a really big choir, so that may have just been like a
Yeah,
handful of us at that event. But
that's
I
awesome.
know a lot of the people that you picture with that's in that picture.
Yeah, Philip Woodard, is that right? Did you know
Yes,
him?
he was the
He
director.
was he was
Um,
amazing.
yeah,
He was
he did a
he
good
was,
job getting us all together.
yeah, that's pretty awesome. Normally I would have never, spoken to anybody or branched out like that. And then I remember going out in the USM parking lot, meeting with Philip Woodard, and he said, "Look, my group does not listen. Most of us do not listen to rock and roll music. It's straight up gospel. They don't understand your music. What do I need to tell them to sell them on this?" And I said, "Well, just let me meet them."
I don't think he was.
And we sat in that car and listened to my music. And I told him about it. 20 minutes later, we're really good friends. So it stepping out like that, I feel blessed to have had certain people in my life. And even though, like Philip, knew him, had only known him for a short amount of time, it changed me. And I think that we can do that as teachers, or it could be someone you meet tomorrow at the gas station. You know?
Completely agree.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions? All right, guys. I guess we have something else coming up at 12. If you want to stick around and ask any questions, you can, but we're pretty good. I hope y'all enjoyed it and got something out of it.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.